Star Wars The Phantom Menace was a movie phenomenon the likes of which we may never see again. George Lucas bringing the sci-fi series back was decades in the making, and in his pursuit of cinematic perfection, I'll leave it up to you to decide if he achieved that, he created a movie that's just as interesting to learn about as it is to watch. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 20 things you didn't know about Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Number 20. Benicio del Toro was supposed to play Darth Maul. Believe it or not, but before Ray Park was cast to play Darth Sidious's apprentice Darth Maul, the role was actually supposed to go to Benicio del Toro. However, del Toro ultimately bailed from the role after George Lucas whittled Maul's lines down to just 3 slivers of dialogue and 6 minutes of screen time. Considering that del Toro's career enjoyed a major uptick regardless in the late 90s and early 2000s, it is hard to fault his decision here. But of course, almost 2 decades and an Oscar later, del Toro did eventually join the Star Wars family in earnest, memorably playing DJ in The Last Jedi. Number 19. It took almost 2 years to edit. The groundbreaking nature of The Phantom Menace's production has been well documented, but the knock-on effect of Lucas spearheading an unprecedented fusion of practical and digital filmmaking techniques is that the film took close to 2 years to edit. Filming began in late June 1997, with editor Paul Martin Smith getting to work on dialogue-centric scenes back in England, while Ben Burtt cut the set pieces with George Lucas. The Phantom Menace, of course, didn't end up hitting cinemas until May 1999, some 19 months after principal photography wrapped, and this is generally accepted to be a result of Lucas's endless tinkering with cutting-edge non-linear digital editing systems. Number 18. Liam Neeson signed on without reading the script. It sure seemed like Lucas's production was lucky to score an actor of Liam Neeson's caliber to play Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, but it absolutely wasn't the quality of the script that lured the legendary star in. Like most of us, Neeson simply assumed a new Star Wars movie would be good, and signed onto the movie without even reading a script. That's how confident he was. Despite Lucas's reputation for being a difficult director on the prequels, Neeson only had kind words to say about him, and even insisted he'd be up for reprising the Qui-Gon role if the opportunity ever arose. Number 17. It has more practical effects than the original trilogy combined. The prequels generally catch plenty of justified flack from fans who see them as emblematic of the soulless potential of filmmaking overly reliant on green screen and CGI. And while they're certainly not wrong, it might surprise fans to know that The Phantom Menace actually featured more miniature sets and props than were made for all 3 of the original Star Wars movies combined. Of course, The Phantom Menace also features more CGI shots than the original trilogy combined as well, but to summarily dismiss the film as nothing more than a gloopy mess of garish effects is to ignore the ridiculous amount of practical craftsmanship that went into so many of the smaller details. I guess it's just a shame that Lucas didn't find a more fortuitous blend between the 2 filmmaking philosophies as he went on. Number 16. George Lucas didn't want to direct it. The Phantom Menace was Lucas's first directorial effort in the 22 years since the release of A New Hope, and as much as fans will cite his lack of filmmaking passion as one of the film's major problems, Lucas himself seemed acutely aware of his own limitations. In fact, he initially invited now Oscar-nominated screenwriter David Hare to co-direct the film, as Lucas felt that a second director could focus on the actors while he could train his attention on helming the action sequences. Hare, of course, refused Lucas, and shortly before The Force Awakens' release, Steven Spielberg also confirmed that himself, Ron Howard, and Robert Zemeckis were all approached to direct The Phantom Menace. Naturally, all refused, feeling that Lucas was the only man right for the job. In an interview, Howard also added that Lucas, quote, didn't necessarily want to direct the prequels, basically confirming that he only took the reins because nobody he trusted actually wanted to take it. Number 15. The musical score spoiled Qui-Gon's death before release. It's incredibly common now for movie scores to be released the same day as the movie itself hits cinemas in order to avoid fans being spoiled ahead of time. In the very least, composers now know not to give away blatant spoilers within the mere titles of the tracks themselves. Sadly, that wasn't the case back in 1999, what with John Williams' acclaimed score for The Phantom Menace releasing a whole 15 days before the film hit cinemas, where 2 tracks also featured major spoilers for the film's final act. That's because the 15th and 16th tracks are respectively titled Qui-Gon's Noble End and The High Council Meeting and Qui-Gon's Funeral, needlessly ruining the fact that Qui-Gon doesn't make it all the way out to the end. Number 14. E.T. has a cameo. The Phantom Menace kickstarted the trend of Star Wars movies featuring Easter eggs, nods, and references to both the wider franchise and also pop culture as a whole. Eagle-eyed viewers might notice the appearance of an EVA pod from Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey in the film's junkyard sequence. But most bizarrely of all is the presence of what seems to be E.T. in the Intergalactic Senate. 3 alien creatures can be spotted who bear an uncanny resemblance to the protagonist of Steven Spielberg's 1982 sci-fi classic, and in canon these are known as Azogians. The cameo reportedly came about as payback for Spielberg after he included numerous blatant Star Wars references in E.T. almost 20 years prior. Number 13, Darth Maul blinks once for every line of dialogue he has. Though it's often stated that Darth Maul only blinks once throughout his 6 minutes of screen time, it's actually 3 times. Once when his double-ended lightsaber is sliced in two, once when he's fatally impaled by Obi-Wan, and once more as he realizes just what's happened to him. The main reason for this is that actor Ray Park suffered severe discomfort while wearing the character's coloured contact lenses, especially when blinking, and consequently felt that it also added an eeriness to Maul's visage. Coincidentally, 3 is also the number of dialogue lines Maul has throughout the film. Number 12, a film of firsts. The Phantom Menace was a historic film for many reasons, resulting in a number of firsts for the franchise, both good and bad. For starters, it was the first of the Star Wars films not to receive a single Academy Award, despite receiving nominations for Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Visual Effects, all of which it quite deservedly lost to The Matrix. In less downcast terms though, it was also the first Star Wars film not to feature any stormtroopers, nor use the word lightsaber, Anakin calls it a laser sword, or to make any mention of the Death Star whatsoever. Number 11, Ian McDiarmid didn't know he was playing Palpatine until he arrived on set. Ian McDiarmid, of course, plays the dual role of Senator Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, in the Star Wars prequels. But given that his much younger self played the grotty Emperor in Return of the Jedi, he initially assumed that Lucas would be casting a younger actor to play the character in the prequels. Moreover, Lucas trolled McDiarmid by keeping him in the dark until just before the camera started rolling. In fact, he told the actor that he would be playing a senator, and he only found out about Palpatine when he reported to set. McDiarmid, though ever the professional, did a fine job pivoting and delivering arguably the most entertaining performance across all of the prequels. Still, though, blindsiding him with the precise nature of his role at the last minute probably was a bit of a gamble, George. Number 10, it cost the American economy $293 million in missed workdays. If you thought the hype surrounding The Force Awakens and the recent Avengers Endgame was something, well, they weren't even close to the hysterical fervor leading up to the release of The Phantom Menace. To that end, people were willingly ditching their employment commitments to see the movie at midnight release and on its opening day, with consulting firm Challenger, Gray & Christmas estimating that 2.2 million full-time employees missed work to see the film in the US alone. This was said to have caused a $293 million loss of productivity in North America alone, not to say anything of the global economic impact across the world. Number 9. Liam Neeson's height added $150,000 to the film's budget. In order to save money on unnecessary construction, the movie's sets were only built as high as the actors' heads, with the rest being keyed in with CGI during post-production. However, the set crew faced an unexpected hurdle due to Liam Neeson's statuesque height of 6 foot 4 inches, requiring them to spend an extra $150,000 extending the sets to accommodate his greater size. Now granted, that figure's basically a drop in the ocean for a $115 million movie, but still, it's absurd that a few extra inches of height can add so much expense to even basic dialogue-centric scenes. Number 8. Lawrence Kasdan refused George Lucas's offer to write the script. In addition to Lucas not wanting to direct the film, he also wasn't terribly keen on writing it either. As such, he originally requested the aid of Lawrence Kasdan, who of course co-wrote The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and went on to co-write The Force Awakens and Solo. But he ended up turning Lucas down, insisting that with Lucas handing much of the creative heavy lifting to collaborators on Empire and Return, he should be more intimately involved with the new trilogy and write it himself. In an interview, Kasdan said of the offer to work in The Phantom Menace, quote, "There were many times over the ensuing years when George asked me to be involved with all 3 prequels. He said, 'Hey, how would you like to write such and such?' And I said, 'George, aren't you supposed to be starting shooting in 2 weeks in Australia?' He said, 'Yeah, but it's not too late.'" End quote. Number 7. Some scenes blended multiple takes together digitally. Lucas's innovative and controversial VFX-heavy approach didn't merely extend to compositing his actors into digital backgrounds. In fact, many scenes across the trilogy were reportedly created from as many as 6 individual takes being layered together in post-production, splicing actors into shots where they weren't present for filming, and stitching both dialogue and reactions together from separate takes to generate Lucas's desired results that weren't achieved during shooting. In fact, you can see Lucas directing these splices in the editing suite on some behind-the-scenes footage, and it became an increasingly surprisingly common trick across Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, presumably as Lucas became more accustomed to the technology and felt more emboldened by it. At least in The Phantom Menace though, it's deployed with a comparative level of subtlety. Number 6. The movie's marketing campaign mocked Godzilla. Roland Emmerich's terrible Godzilla movie was released the year before The Phantom Menace, and touted a provocative marketing campaign which focused on, well, anything but actually showing audiences what the titular monster looked like. Posters memorably insisted that, quote, size does matter, yet between the film's ultimately negative reviews and disappointing box office, it clearly wasn't that true. In an uncharacteristically catty move for Star Wars marketing though, Lucasfilm decided to take a potshot at Godzilla by posting a mock poster on StarWars.com. Styled in the Godzilla font, the poster stated, quote, plot does matter, a barb jab at Godzilla's atrocious screenplay, yet that's also a gag which didn't age all that well when the movie eventually came out. Number 5. The pod racing spectators were actually Q-tips. The most memorable set piece in The Phantom Menace, both for better and for worse, is the mid-film pod racing sequence, and though it's largely a triumph of digital visual effects, it also benefits from one especially ingenious practical effect. Model maker Michael Lynch created the illusion of the pod racing audience rowdily cheering in the stands by taking 450,000 Q-tips, painting them, and inserting them into a mesh grid. Fans would then blow air underneath, causing them to move about and simulate the motion of a fervent crowd. Number 4. George Lucas gave Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson 10 minutes to choose lightsabers. To Lucas's minor credit, he did seem to give the biggest stars of the prequels a certain amount of input with regard to their characters, notably granting Samuel L. Jackson's request for his Mace Windu to have a distinctive purple lightsaber. The same was also true for Ewan McGregor and Liam Neeson, who were taken to a private room just before shooting began and were presented with a locked box which boasted 20 different lightsaber hilts. Lucas allowed them to pick their own hilts, yet in order to keep the choice instinctual, he only gave them a total of 10 minutes to actually think about it. Number 3. The Jar Jar Binks backlash caused actor AHMED Best to consider suicide. There is nothing in the Star Wars prequels, and especially The Phantom Menace, more controversial, if not widely loathed, than the presence of squeaky voice Gungan Jar Jar Binks. Yet there is a sad component to all of this ire, namely the impact it had on Jar Jar's actor AHMED Best, who above all else was simply playing the part created and directed by George Lucas. In fact, it got so bad that Best confessed that he had considered suicide following the reaction to the character. I don't think we really needed a reminder of just how toxic some portions of fan bases can be, but it's another case of while Jar Jar might be a terrible character, not being able to separate a fictional character from a real actor can cause real problems. Number 2. Qui-Gon originally returned for the sequels. Initially, Qui-Gon didn't actually exist at all, and the bulk of The Phantom Menace saw Obi-Wan hanging out with Anakin by himself, with most of Qui-Gon's notable attributes rolled into Obi-Wan's character. But despite the expectation from many fans that Qui-Gon would be sticking around for the whole trilogy after he was introduced, well, the expectation of those who didn't read the damn soundtrack listing before seeing the movie anyway, he of course ends up being killed by Darth Maul at the end of this first film. And this was also a major change of plan, as Lucas initially planned to have Qui-Gon return as a Force ghost in the sequels, who would try to stop Anakin from turning to the dark side. Number 1. Ewan McGregor made lightsaber noises during fight scenes, which had to be edited out. And finally, we'll end on a hilarious little anecdote that a lot of people know, but if you don't, it's sure to make your day. And it all stems from Ewan McGregor's childlike love of the Star Wars franchise. McGregor had the unshakable habit of vocalizing the lightsaber sound effects on set, as we've all surely been guilty of in our youth and our grown adult lives, requiring the film's sound editors to remove them during post-production. Granted, it must have been a fun time at work for the sound team, listening to McGregor screeching every 2 seconds and the like. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Did you know all of these facts about the Phantom Menace, and are there any cool tidbits I missed off here? While you're down there as well, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and check out What Culture Star Wars for more lists and news like this on the regular. Even if you don't know, I've been Josh. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.